Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Once again, my name is Tony Staffaroni. I'm the Stakeholder and Community Relations Manager here at CAP, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's roundtable. Just a couple of logistics before we get started. With these microphones, we can have a total of 3 to 4 on at a time. So when you speak, you can touch the little icon, the little speaking voice, but when you're finished, if you wouldn't mind just please turning it off. When the red light is on, that means it's on. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We might as well start with introductions. We'll go around the room. Greg, do you want to go ahead and start?
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Adams. I am Senior Attorney here at CAP.
Chuck Cullum, Colorado River Programs Manager for Central Arizona Project.
Patrick Dent, Director of Water Policy, Central Arizona Project.
Wally Wilson with Metro Water District in Southern Arizona, and I am also speaking for SAWA.
Sorry. Drew Swiskowski, City of Glendale Water Resource Manager.
Chris Connor, City of Chandler, Utility Regulatory Affairs Manager.
Craig Caggiano, City of Tempe.
Eric Brown, Town of Gilbert.
Cynthia Campbell, City of Phoenix.
Mike Loggins, Apache Junction Water District.
Lacey James, City of Avondale.
Jessica Fox, I'm the new Water Policy Advisor for AMWA, and I'm here on behalf of Warren Tenney today.
Jason Howder, Counsel to the Gila River Indian Community.
Katasha Nakai, Counsel to the Ak-Chin Indian Community.
Jerry Walker, Water Rights Administrator, Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation.
Robin Interpreter from Montgomery and Interpreter, Special Counsel to the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation.
Leslie Myers, Bureau of Reclamation.
Chris Custis, EDF and Water for Arizona Coalition.
Tony just gave me the nod, so I think that means we're moving forward. So just a quick overview about why we're here today. We in addition to kind of our announcement to want to meet and talk about the impact to fixed O&M with regard to water conservation projects and our goals to set a board policy around that. We're here to seek some feedback from stakeholders on how we consider that and how it's collected. We had put some materials out ahead of time. Hopefully everyone's be able to locate and review those. Maybe one comment about that. In an effort to be frank, we really try to work hard to frame the discussion and to include relevant information and background so that it focuses our comments to the particular policy issue or subject at hand, without taking that next step and implying that we've already decided what the answer is. And I admit freely it can be a delicate balance. I hope we've achieved that today, but certainly our objective in being here and meeting with you is to receive some comments on what we've proposed and on the subject. And we're here to hear what you have to say, and we'll use those thoughts and comments as we take our next steps to craft a proposal to take before the CAWCD board. So I think our goal for today is I'm going to, I think, first turn it over to Greg to talk about the nature of the water delivery contracts and fixed O&M in general. And then following Greg's comments, we're going to give Chuck a little bit of time to talk about some framing kind of the policy considerations, and then we'll turn it over to the group after that to hear what your thoughts and feelings are, and we'll go from there. So, Mr. Adams.
All right, great, thank you. As Patrick just said, my kind of goal here is to kind of provide some of the contractual and other contextual background relevant to the topic for today. And kind of at the outset, CAWCD holds a contract with the United States for the diversion and delivery of Colorado River water to CAP users as project water and to repay the costs of the Central Arizona project. CAWCD has exclusive control over what's known as excess water, which is defined as water unused by CAP long-term contractors and subcontractors. So CAP contractors and subcontractors hold water delivery contracts for the delivery of CAP project water, and they exercise those contracts or subcontracts through the annual water ordering process. And in so doing, they order water for their use within their entitlement volume. Water that is not scheduled for delivery by senior priority users is available for use by junior priority water users, including the excess pool. Pursuant to terms of contracts, CAWCD contractors and subcontractors are required to pay fixed OM&R charges on all water scheduled for delivery. If contractors or subcontractors are unable to accept delivery of scheduled water, they remain obligated to pay fixed OM&R charges for the water unless the water is remarketed to other CAP users, who those other CAP users would in turn pay the associated fixed OM&R charge for that remarketed water, and that would release the obligation of the contractor or subcontractor that originally scheduled that water for delivery. CAWCD uses a formula established in the stipulation for judgment, which most of you are familiar, but is a stipulated judgment resolving litigation between the United States and CAWCD. They use that formula to establish a fixed OM&R charge. And under that formula, CAWCD determines the fixed OM&R rate annually by dividing CAWCD's estimated fixed OM&R costs for the following year by the total amount of project water that CAWCD estimates will actually be delivered through the project works in the following year. So proceeding to the next slide. With that background, then kind of going more into system conservation projects generally, system conservation projects require a reduction from beneficial use and the demonstration of a persistent history of use. This concept has been well established in existing system conservation programs, including the Pilot System Conservation Program and system conservation activities with the Colorado River Indian tribes. So in order to effectuate a reduction from existing beneficial use, the CAP contractor or subcontractor must first order the water for delivery and then submit an amended order reducing the quantity of water ordered by the amount of intended system conservation. The water order itself is important because without a water order, the water would be immediately available to other CAP users. And as noted previously, that water order constitutes the initial exercise of that contract right. So for system conservation projects involving project water to contribute to Lake Mead, CAWCD must agree to refrain from remarketing that conserved water to junior priority water users. And then foregoing that remarketing, foregoing remarketing the conserved water, including the forbearance by CAWCD on behalf of excess pool, will result in an increased fixed OM&R charge on all CAP ratepayers unless a fixed OM&R equivalency charge is paid to offset those increased costs. So with that background, I'm going to shift over to Chuck now to kind of discuss some of the other policy considerations.
Okay, so thanks, Greg. So essentially, the threshold policy question is who's going to pay the fixed OM&R equivalency fee for system conservation in the CAP system. You'll note from our document, the briefing document and the slides, we keep saying with CAP project water, it's redundant, typing it was annoying. But when we first brought this issue up for discussion, we heard from our on-river friends that they wanted us to be abundantly clear that we weren't going to collect CAP fixed OM&R on Colorado River main stem conservation project. So I just wanted to remind folks that this is just about conservation within the CAP service area. So it doesn't have, doesn't touch on the offset component that's underway with the Colorado River Indian tribes or other potential future projects. So let's get back to the question at hand. As Greg outlined, we are required to capture the fixed OM&R pursuant to the formula that's described in the repayment contract and stipulation. As we've talked about it internally and we've reviewed our recent experiences, we analyzed 3 approaches to collect that fixed OM&R equivalency charge or the rate itself for system conservation projects. And I just want to outline that we've had several pilot programs, and we have also framed through the ICS framework agreement we have exercised all of these approaches to date. The contractor or subcontractor pays, that's one alternative. So if a contractor or subcontractor, through their discretion, wants to create additional system conservation above and beyond what's required through the existing drought contingency plan agreements, they're free to do so. This policy approach would require them to pay the equivalent fixed OM&R charge for the conserved water. Again, the steps are straightforward. You order your amount that you intend to use. If you're conserving water, you amend that order to reflect the reduction. And in this policy concept, that contractor or subcontractor would be on the hook to pay for the fixed OM&R equivalent to the reduction in the amended water order. This approach avoids an increase to all the other CAP ratepayers that would manifest if we didn't collect the equivalency charge from that contractor or subcontractor. This is the approach that we are implementing in the ICS programs within the CAP system, where when a contractor reduces their use through an approved ICS creation plan, they are responsible to pay the fixed OM&R equivalency fee. The second approach that we've identified and have exercised is the second bullet on this slide, the funder pays. So instead of the contractor or subcontractor, whoever is, in this case, a third party who is funding the conservation activity is responsible to pay the fixed OM&R equivalency fee. This is the approach that the Pilot System Conservation Program, a partnership between CAWCD, Southern Nevada, Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, Denver Water, and the United States, undertook in 2015 with the Tohono O'odham Nation. And the funders paid the Tohono O'odham Nation to reduce their use, as well as paid the fixed OM&R fee for the conserved water. And then the third alternative, which we have also exercised, is that all CAP users contribute. So in this case, there would be no fixed OM&R equivalency charge collected, assessed or collected, and all CAP users who pay fixed have an incremental increase in their costs. This is the approach that was undertaken in a couple of other pilot system conservation projects, as well as in the program in 2017 with the Gila River Indian Community. That program was funded by the Arizona Department of Water Resources, the United States, the City of Phoenix, and I believe EDF. And the board, in their forbearance action, acknowledged that the fixed OM&R would be collected, the equivalence, the impact of the forbearance would result in an increase in the incremental costs for all the other CAP users paying fixed. So those are the three approaches that CAP has exercised, and I'm uncertain if it's the universe of possibilities. We're here to hear other ideas, but these are the three ways that we have addressed this issue to date. And going forward, so in 2019 and 2020 through the term of the DCP, the subcontractor pays is the approach we're doing with ICS. So we have, through the Arizona ICS Framework Agreement, set at least that as one approach for intentionally created surplus. There are additional considerations as we think about developing a draft policy. The first is, from staff's perspective, I don't think my throat's going to get much better, but that's okay. Staff's perspective is that the policy should run coterminous with the drought contingency plan. That's meaning through the end of 2026. The basis for that is it's uncertain how Colorado River contributions and reductions will be, what the future of the programs look like past 2026. And so we think it's appropriate. This system conservation is part of the drought contingency framework, and so we want to have the policy run coterminous with that. We see this as, in several ways, as a pilot project, a pilot program, and gain experience on what the long-term impacts might be. Second is, as we think about the potential for system conservation within the CAP system, we wonder if there should be volume limitations at different, should we consider the operating tier? Should the policy be different in normal, meaning above 1090, versus tier 0, the operating condition we're in right now, between 1075 and 1090, or tier 1 between 1075 and 1050? The amount of contributions required, meaning the amount of water, the reduction in available CAP water, means that as the reductions increase, that is Lake Mead's operating condition, operating levels are lower, there's less water available to CAP on the front end, therefore additional system conservation impacts on a financial basis, the unit cost of those impacts increases, the less water is available. So as Greg outlined, the fixed cost is the numerator, the water available for delivery is the denominator. If the denominator gets small, I know it's algebra, actually it's just division. As the denominator gets smaller, then as you reduce the amount of available supply, the unit cost goes up. So that leads to the third question: is there sensitivity around the range of financial impacts? For example, if the preferred policy perspective is all CAP users contribute, is there a boundary around how much you are willing to fund someone else's conservation? So at this point, Tony's back in charge. Tony's back in charge.
I've got the easy job, actually. So just like we've done at the previous roundtables, we would like to go around and actually have everyone who is sitting at the table make any comments, ask any questions that are needed for clarification, or provide any suggestions, any other things that you would like us to consider. So if you don't mind, I'll actually start with Cynthia.
Usually when I sit on the end, it starts on the other way. That's a guarantee of the other side going first. That's fine.
Eric did pay us.
But I think Eric and I are like a toss-up here, so. The city of Phoenix is very supportive of the idea of system conservation, and we think that system conservation has proven to be a benefit, not just to the individual who creates it, but to the entire system, all of us as users of the Central Arizona Project, and in fact, all users in the basin states. System conservation has created over 175,000 acre feet of additional water that is left in the system that benefits no individual person. It benefits all of us. And when we are looking at a situation with Lake Mead and Lake Powell now, in which either of those reservoirs could continue to slide downward to a point where we're not talking about how much it costs to get our water, but whether we get any water. It seems to me unusual to have a conversation that is focused on the financial aspects of doing an activity that benefits all of us. So to that end, the city of Phoenix supports the idea that if system conservation is created, the resulting change in the OM&R rate, which again, OM&R by definition is the cost of moving water. So for those of us who caused water to move, that is asked for delivery, we pay it. It should just get absorbed by the remainder of the customers who do order water. As far as the other issues, there are a lot of really good issues raised in this policy paper about system conservation, about the nature of it, about how to plan it, how to program it, and we believe that those conversations should take place in the context of a committee that's created by the state, because this is a matter of statewide benefit. It is not just a Central Arizona matter. The health of Lake Mead is a matter that is a statewide concern. And so that should be a committee that is that includes ADWR, arguably led by ADWR, and includes obviously CAWCD as the last contract holder, but also stakeholders involved, M&I subcontractors, tribal entities, the Bureau of Reclamation, so we can make these decisions in a more cogent fashion in a planned way. So that way, if we do experience additional costs in OM&R, that those costs are known in advance and that we know they're coming because we have targets that we've created for how much system conservation would be created in a given year and how we go forward, as opposed to a piecemeal operation where it's just kind of like whoever kind of scrambles together and puts together a proposal submits it. So I think from our perspective, that's the way we see going forward, but especially for today's conversation, we definitely would not support the idea that disincentivizes system conservation by putting the additional financial burden of the conservation on the person who creates it or the person who is funding. So that's where we are.
Well, I'm going to agree with Cynthia here with, conservation benefits us all, so we should probably all benefit from that as a cost. So in the end, each user should help out with that portion of it because it is saving water for us, pushing it further out from the next plan or what we have to put into the next step. So we'll keep it short, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
All right, so Avondale, we agree, ditto to Cynthia. She did a great job summarizing how we feel about it. Just wanted to kind of reiterate that, yeah, it is a statewide topic, so we would like to see everybody involved and where we can be at the table or at least have a part of that discussion. And then also just wanted to stress the financial impact to us. Our budget is not in sync with CEP's budget. So, we're already done with our budget. It goes for approval here next month. So if we do conservation and it's spread through all users, we definitely just need to have an idea of what that increase will be so we can put that before our council when they approve our budget. And we don't have to go back and say, hey, we have a big increase that we didn't expect.
I just also wanted to echo the comments made by Cynthia and Lacey. The cities support option 3, which is having the water users pay for the cost of the fixed OM&R rather than having the charge be applied to those creating or funding the system conservation. We're strongly in support of not disincentivizing the system conservation projects. And also echoing Cynthia's comments, we want to encourage a discussion of how there could be a committee formed or stakeholder group to provide more strategic oversight on how the system conservation projects will be created and come together to ensure that it's done efficiently and with consideration of the financial impacts to the cities. Thanks.
Thank you for holding this forum. I think you're probably aware of the community's position with regard to a fixed OM&R equivalency fee. I think in the negotiation of the 2017 System Conservation Agreement, we were opposed to that, and that position hasn't changed. I will say that the community does agree and that fixed OM&R should be charged for intentionally created surplus because that's eventually going to be in the system again. So it's an apples and oranges kind of conservation. So with respect to water, that's whether it's conservation or any other use of tribal water or tribal CAP water where the water is not actually going through the CAP system, the community's position really is the fixed OM&R charge should not apply to tribes. Mainly because it's concerns with the solvency of the Lower Colorado Basin Development Fund. And so if water is being delivered through the system, yes. If not, no. And I do agree with the prior speakers that it is a disincentive to add additional costs with respect to system conservation. I guess one question I do have is it would be helpful, I think, to get a projection to the DCP. What's the system conservation volume going to be annually? Is there any projection to that? What's going to be the impact to rates potentially? I mean, the community just curious to know what that projection is. I know it's kind of written on sand, but I imagine you guys have looked at that.
So at this juncture, there is one system conservation project for 2020. It's 10,000 acre feet with the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. And I think the rule of thumb is that if the policy results in the impact being of the 10,000 acre feet of ordered water, but then conserved, the reduction in order is about 60 cents increase to all the users in fixed. Yes, per acre foot. So instead of whatever the number is, it's that number plus 60 cents for 2020 based on for the 10,000. Yeah. Beyond and Jason, there is no requirement or commitment from except for the United States commitment to create or conserve 100,000 acre feet, which is why they're doing 20,000 or 10,000 in 2020. There's no program or plan to do more than what is required in the drought contingency plan and in the Arizona Framework Agreement with the programs for system conservation with CRIT and the work that your client's doing to create ICS.
And just to add, so I just think it's helpful to know kind of what the actual impact the rates are. And we can't know for certain because I know Leslie's working on probably some system conservation agreements with tribes or others for that matter. But it's just for as a ratepayer, even though it is through the fund, but we were very concerned about the fund. We just want to know what that incremental cost is, just for planning purposes more than anything else. So any information you can provide when you have it is helpful.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Didn't realize Central Arizona Project was way on this side of Phoenix coming. I mean, further down south, this is another world to us, another different part of the world. But my name's Robert McGill. I'm chairman of the Auction Indian community, and we're happy to be included here today. We are stakeholders of the CAP system with an entitlement to CAP water. We were the first tribe, if you didn't know, for those who do not know, we were the first tribe in the United States to enter an Indian water rights settlement, yet despite all these years of experience dealing with implementation matters, too often we are overlooked. We were extended a seat at the table today, and we believe we should always have a seat at the table and consulted throughout the process as policies are being developed, not after or not as an afterthought. So I'm here today and look forward to beginning the discussion, as I trust this is the beginning. Again, we haven't had a seat at the table. We're excited to be here and to listen and to understand ways to develop or ways to move forward together. At this time we can't form an opinion until the Bureau tells us what it will cost them. Generally speaking, we do not like threats to the Bureau of Reclamation's budget or resources. We believe it is in our best interest for the Bureau to remain financially healthy, of course. I'm interested in what others have to say today and why. I don't have any other particular comments on the subject until we have a consultation with the Bureau, which has not happened yet. But we're looking forward to that happening, definitely. If you are serious about your timelines, I assume that will be happening soon so the Bureau can fully understand what its responsibilities are to advocate on behalf of each of the tribe it represents. And one of the things I'd like to really have everyone aware of is as we move forward, when you're consulting with one tribe, it doesn't necessarily mean that because you consulted with that tribe, you consulted with all the tribes. So it's very crucial and it's very important that when we move together that all tribes with the water settlement or are in the process of a water settlement, that they're involved and they're at the table. And it's our responsibility as tribes to be there. So again, we appreciate the opportunity to sit down and learn and move together. We do know there's a drought in the Southwest, and we're doing all we can. We're putting our efforts together to make sure we're coming up with a solution. So I'm excited to be here, and I thank you guys.
I think the chairman's comments were adequate. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robin, interpreter again, legal counsel for the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation, and so we are the guinea pig this year for all of you. But I kind of wanted to talk about this idea of the disincentivizing because I think the nation has the story of that and the teeter-tottering that's happened with regard to kind of this whole situation that's arisen. So Fort McDowell had actually engaged in pilot system conservation probably in, I think, 2014 or 2015 and had done that transaction. And then a couple of years ago, back in 2018, we started talking with Reclamation again about doing some pilot system conservation. So for calendar year 2019, we did a pilot system conservation project again with Reclamation, and that water then was conserved in the reservoir. And then, so of course we all know DCP was being negotiated and all of those deals were being made. And we said, well, you know, this has been good. The nation's really happy to be be helping and supporting the conservation on the river for all users in Arizona. The nation really does understand we're all in this together. We all have to kind of pull together. And so they did that deal for the 2019. And then we started last year negotiating the 2020 arrangements and said, hey, Reclamation, if you would like to do another transaction with us, we'd be glad to do that. And so we had those discussions. And then along about, I think it was June of last summer, while we were kind of solidifying everything, because, you know, everybody has to get their water orders in by October 1st, we had heard back that there was this idea that, oh, all of a sudden fixed OM&R needed to be assessed against this conservation project. And we were told that Reclamation might not be able to do this deal and may not be able to afford to do this deal. And I said, oh man, that, you know, that of course everybody's trying to handle all their water and get it managed. And so we came up with the idea of let's do the transaction and kind of put a placeholder here. But we came very close to walking away from doing system conservation this year. So there almost wasn't 10,000 acre feet that went to system conservation because this would impact the cost. So we are the guinea pig, we're the story. But I also acknowledge Chairman Miguel's statements. You know, Reclamation has so many obligations on their shoulders. They've made an obligation in the DCP program to conserve 100,000 acre feet of water. But then at the same time, they have obligations to appropriate, the United States of America has obligations to appropriate the funding to pay the OM&R for OCCHN. And then for other tribes who are also using CAP on their reservations, that comes from the Lower Colorado River Basin Development Fund. So then there can be impacts there. So there's a lot of balancing in this entire look at this and this question. And so it's good we're all sitting around the table. I would say in the analysis, in the legal side of the analysis, we're pretty firmly positioned that we don't think it would be legal to charge a fixed OM&R equivalency fee for at least the Indian contracts, the way they read, and the way the stipulation reads with regard to the ability to charge the federal government for federal deliveries, which are Indian deliveries, for anything other than fixed OM&R and pumping energy. So, but aside from that, I think there is a big policy discussion here, and I think it's important that we all kind of talk it out and see if we can find a way through. However, though, I do want to say that it was one of those things where it was kind of sudden to happen last summer. To have this kind of blow up at that very moment when pilot system projects have been going on, since 2012, I believe? So they've been going on for several years, and so I think, you know, having that kind of moment of, oh no, you know, was a little bit stunning. But we're here, we're working through it, so we're here to work around the table with you all, but it definitely is an important topic, I think, for everybody to talk about. So there you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leslie Myers with the Bureau of Reclamation. So really, I just want to give you a little bit of background on where we are. And yes, we did enter into a project this year, or into an agreement for a project this year. You know, for many years, the Bureau of Reclamation worked with the other funding partners just to see, we called it the Pilot System Conservation Program, just to see if a project like that could even get off the ground. If folks were willing to contribute system water that would be attributable only to the system, couldn't be recovered later, what the cost would be, how projects like that would work. In theory, that pilot was in actuality, the pilot was very successful. And we, in fact, found out that it does work, and we do know how much it costs, and we entered into a lot of really good, fruitful agreements for the system. So as a part of DCP, so let's say today we're past that pilot now because we know how it works, and we are implementing DCP. The United States has a commitment in DCP to create up to, based on our appropriations and available funding, up to 100,000 acre feet each year. I will tell you, has always been our intention to invest upfront in projects that would be sustaining. So it's not our intention to try to appropriate money year after year after year to do these pilot system conservation projects. It just so happens that those infrastructure projects aren't ready to start producing yet for a number of different reasons, and if anyone's interested, and we'll talk to the tribes about this too. So this year, in 2020, we were looking at pilot system conservation projects, and there's potential for the next couple years that we might do that. We understand that when CAP and Arizona is contributing huge volumes to the Colorado River, we don't really want to come look here too for our contributions. We understand the burden that that creates on CAP. So I just wanted to make that clear, and maybe even clearer is that I could see us doing this for a couple of years potentially, but we don't have any intention, and I guarantee you we're not going to have the kind of funding that we would need to do something like that long term. Now that doesn't preclude, we've done other projects for looking for water for firming, which is a whole nother subject, and looked at ICS and other things like that. We will continue to do that. The effects on fixed OM&R aren't the same for ICS creation because the water will be delivered through the canal and fixed OM&R will be paid for that delivery. So just clarity-wise on all of that. That's kind of where we are. I think we're hoping that in the next couple of years that we will get things like the 242 well field in Yuma on board, and we will get a consistent volume of water for system water each year. There'll be water eventually from Brock Reservoir for the same kinds of things. So we have a plan. We've done an internal analysis, and we have a plan for moving forward on the development of that and costs associated with it. So I just wanted to be clear so that folks know that it's really not our intention to come back year after year with system conservation program.
Hello, everyone. Chris Custis with EDF. As Chuck pointed out, EDF was the first, and I believe still only, third-party contributor to the pilot system conservation program. We've been proud to work with CAWCD on that. We were also partners to the 2017 City of Phoenix, Gila River Indian Community, Bureau of Reclamation, and ADWR system conservation project. And thus far, we've been able to raise $2.75 million towards the NGO commitment as our part in the DCP system conservation program with the Colorado River Indian tribes. And so with that said, in that program, we've been able to attract a good amount of interest from diverse funders. So Water Funders Initiative, Intel, and Microsoft. So we are concerned that by CAWCD potentially leveraging a fee or a charge on system conservation, that would disincentivize and make it more difficult for more diverse funders to participate in system conservation if those projects were on the CAP system. And of course, we're looking at the policy alternatives through the lens of how do these help us advance system conservation and other actions that help reduce risk on the system for the benefit of all. So of course, we support the third alternative, while we certainly recognize that there is a cost impact of doing system conservation on OM&R rates, sharing that burden, and more importantly, sharing the benefits that result for all is just a part of adjusting to our new water reality from our perspective.
Gretchen, I think you're next.
First, I'd like to thank CAP for giving us this opportunity to voice our opinions on this topic. And at the risk of being overly redundant, Goodyear agrees with our fellow AMWOS cities in that we would like to avoid disincentivizing those who would choose to do system conservation. And we would also support the third option of spreading out those impacts of reduced deliveries to those who are taking delivery of the water. Thank you.
There is one more system use or system conservation agreement in effect for 2020 through 2026. Metro Water District has an agreement with CAP where we will divert 3,500 acre feet of our allocation to system conservation. Our understanding is that that could be used to support the lowest tier possible in the lake or to firm up currently used by entities NIA water. So the next priority for this conservation agreement would be for either both Indian and municipal NIA that's currently in use right now. So our position would be that we would like to see that option 3, that since this supports, it's a small amount of water, but it supports both of the goals of firming NIA and keeping us hopefully above 1075 with all the other contributions that are currently being and have been for years. Our position would be that that should be shared by all who benefit from it.
Fred Stevens, representing the city of Surprise, Northwest Valley City. Pretty much, we're just going to want to thank CAP and for allowing us to seat at the table here. I think it's just very valuable. The efforts, the pre-planning that always goes forward for us. It definitely provides certainty for our customers, and so at the end of the day, we appreciate these efforts. And I'm just going to reserve any comments at this time and just save it for later. But again, we appreciate having a seat at the table.
Good afternoon. The City of Glendale does support option 3. We think it is a good idea to spread those costs among all users for system conservation. And also, we do agree that a committee or stakeholder group should be held to look at some of the details for system conservation. So what everybody else said, my sister cities of Amwa and Sawa, yeah, that's ditto on that.
Chris Connor, City of Chandler. Like many have said, we agree with option 3 here, that seems like it's something that benefits all the users in the system to be saving water. Like Chris mentioned, this is sort of our new reality, and that saving water for the entire system is a good thing, so we agree.
Craig Hedgiano, City of Tempe. I'll be brief. We've said a lot on this, and I think we've said some good things. City of Tempe is very supportive of system conservation, and we agree as well with option 3.
Yeah, I'll just, the only thing that I would add is that Robin's statement about the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation's experience of kind of inconsistency with a plan going forward. I think this idea of a stakeholder committee or group that has some, develop some sort of rules of the road so that we understand as a state what's happening from year to year, and so we can really do some good planning for what level of system conservation we want to do. I think that sounds like a really great idea, and it sounds like there's a lot of merit behind it from some of the experiences of others.
So Tony, through his mental prowess, indicated that we could ask some clarifying questions, even though he didn't say a word. Impressive work there, Tony. So I have two questions. A comment for Wally. With Metro's conservation, it either cascades to ICS and the fixed will be collected when that water is delivered, or if we are in tier 1 or lower, the water cascades up into the M&I or NIA pool and the fixed is collected through the remarketing of that conservation to the next pool of water users. So that approach is more like the remarketing contract priority approach, where we're not foregoing the remarketing opportunity. So it's not directly analogous to the system conservation that we're discussing at this juncture. I just wanted folks to be clear about that. With regards to the comments, it's one of the questions I have for the group is, how do we provide cost transparency so that there's efficiency in when folks are looking at system conservation, as between the CAP system or other communities who can conserve water into Lake Mead. If, for example, the going rate for system conservation payments in the CAP system is $240 an acre foot, and the cost of foregone fixed is carried by everyone else, perhaps the true cost of that activity, paying a contractor or subcontractor to reduce their use, plus the subsidy provided by all the other users, the true cost is more like $320. So if EDF is looking to maximize the efficiency of their investment, how do we convey what the true costs are? Or is that something we're not particularly interested in? Because right now, as I understand it, Fort McDowell's going to receive a payment of $240, and the customers are going to pick up the fixed.
There is no fixed OM&R on water that's not delivered. There just isn't. I understand that there is an increased cost, but that happens anytime any water user fails to order their entire allocation. If they fail to order their entire allocation, there's less water going through the system, OM&R costs go up. OM&R is the cost to deliver water. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't see it as a subsidy when the cost to deliver Phoenix's water just went up, because it costs you more to deliver our water because there's less water to spread it around to. That doesn't mean that we paid for somebody else's water to be delivered, because it wasn't delivered. We just paid more for our own.
Well, so the transaction is foregoing remarketing to the next priority. And so rather than that water cascading into the NIA pool or the excess pool or the other excess pool or statutory firming pool, where it would be delivered, in support of system conservation, the first step is we're all agreeing to forego that remarketing step, right? So the water is not delivered. And so it's your opinion then that the remaining, all the customers pick up the incremental increase. And the price signal for system conservation then becomes, in some ways, muddied. As an entity is comparing how to, an investment in one community or another to create system water, I just wonder if that's an issue you've considered.
I think it's all the ratepayers' contribution, and it's kind of a voluntary contribution, is another way to look at it. So it's not, it's in terms of comparing something of EDF is shopping around, if this is what you're getting at, kind of what the bang for its buck. If what's on the table is a voluntary contribution of ratepayers willing to absorb costs because there's less water in the system, I don't know that that's really relevant to EDF. What the cost of paying someone not to use their water is probably more relevant, and so I don't know that going through that exercise is necessarily helpful to EDF or not. Maybe it's knowing that ratepayers are agreeing to take on this additional cost is helpful, and whether they know what that dollar amount or not, it's not coming from them. And so I won't speak for EDF, but I think I don't know that it muddies the situation. It's just something, there is a consensus, it seems, or those here anyway, that absorbing the cost of less water in the system is a good thing if it's going towards conservation of water in the system.
No, and just, Jason, that's really helpful. I appreciate that, because one of the things that I've struggled with in framing this question is listening to the board over many, many years is a desire for cost transparency. And the way you described sort of the volunteers, and lots of volunteers today, that'll be helpful in describing that back to the board.
Yeah, I just another way of looking at it, Chuck, I think it's just a more simple way is just what Cynthia described. If there's less water in the system, rates are going to go up because there's a certain cost that you have to pass on to the customers. So I don't know that you would necessarily consider it a contribution, but it is something everyone's willing to do because there's this additional benefit. And my only point was, I don't know that it muddies things, but to your point on kind of transparency, I can speak from the community standpoint. So long as you can you have your best guess of what the increased costs are going to be and where you can show that, knowing full well that there may be some last minute agreements that throw things off a little bit. Your best guess in terms of what the fixed OM&R rates are going to be is helpful just to know, just so for our own planning purposes and budgeting. But I think that's, how do you come to that, how you determine that fixed OM&R is helpful, knowing that there are some factors that are, they're beyond your control. You don't know until you know.
Can I just add that it sounds like you're really trying to portray the full impact of a system conservation. And so while it may not be an additional cost, it's just the cost is spread somewhere else. I think it is fair to mark that additional OM&R that is not captured by that use as an impact of the program. So in the example, if it was $240 for the system conservation and the OM&R is 80 or something like that, I think it's totally fair to mark that 80 as a component or an impact of that project. And I understand, to Jason's point of maybe not to EDF, it won't matter. I'm going to just throw that out there. It doesn't matter to you, Chris.
I feel like I'm going to have to comment here.
As far as his comparison shopping, but I think maybe it's almost like an in-kind contribution from the rest of the subcontractors. And so that does have some sort of a measurable impact when you look at it outside of the state as well.
Just, again, jumping in front of you again, that's a really important point, Eric, is that the ability to, and we did that in the board's consideration in 2017 for the two Gila River conservation programs to provide clarity and transparency to the board and stakeholders on what the incremental impact was, and I think it was about $3 million total. And marking that and tracking it will be important when discussions outside the state of Arizona occur.
And frankly, for us, it's a point of pride as well that we're willing to contribute in some small way, even if it's not with water, it's with paying more through these rates. So.
Yeah, and Chuck, I think you're asking really good questions, and from our perspective, I think similar to what Jason was saying, we're looking at the broader system. So we're certainly aware that there is a cost of less water moving into the system, and we'd be interested in working as a part of a broader stakeholder committee to better understand that moving forward. I think you're asking some good questions up there. Let's think about that under different shortage tiers, cost benefits on both ends. There's Lake Mead, the system itself to consider. There's the impacts on the system within CAP as well, and we would be interested in exploring that.
Okay.
And I would just say, we can't lose sight of the big picture that we all worked on to accomplish to save the system, because the cost of OM&R, if the system crashes, is going to be exponential. So it's pay a little now or pay a little later. So, I mean, when you look at system conservation, and as Leslie said, it's really it's working. It's doing some positive things. It's having positive benefit. It's helping manage the system better and smooth out the bumps. And, I think we have to all think about that. I agree, transparency is important because it has an impact all over the board. You got to run all the numbers, but you also have to put them up next to the big numbers that I'm sure you've run that are in the event that we have these shortages. And so I think, it's a good discussion, but we have to always remember that cost too.
Just wanted to make maybe a follow-up clarifying comment in part to what Jason and Lacey shared about budgets. It's true that, and certainly has been our history with the pilot system conservation program, that the projects aren't apparent at the time we set the rates. And so, however, we do quarterly forecasting once things are known. So I think we have an ongoing commitment to keep our water users informed of, hey, here's what's happening, here might be the level of the impact, and then that'll be reflected as we move through real time. We certainly have a desire, if we get to a place where water conservation within the CEP system is more frequent, more programmatic, to try and work to align the timing of that is favorable for managing those costs.
Could I make a point just following up on what Patrick said? And I think in recognition of the budgetary impacts based on this volunteering or the giving up and taking on that additional cost, for those entities that are doing that, and as the nation is an entity that's interested in future system conservation, I would just say that we're committed. You mentioned a longer, a planning process. We're committed to participating in such a process, and in doing so, if we can give more certainty over a longer period of time, obviously we're offering, we don't have a partner for future system conservation, but, if those things could be done a little ahead of time, as Patrick said, that we have a little more window and horizon so everyone's budgets can be planned better in advance. We're definitely committed to doing that.
And I would look to our partner with the Bureau of Reclamation and the commitment that you made today, Leslie, about the system conservation in increments within the CAP system, and you have been a good partner on sharing when concepts emerge so that we can incorporate them into our plan and operation and schedule, and we look forward to continuing that coordination. When the Fort McDowell project came about, we shared the need to develop a policy, recognizing that going forward with the implementation of DCP, there are opportunities for, particularly with the United States, for more of these projects to emerge. And rather than trying to sort it all out between the first implementation of DCP from May to October water orders, we committed to have this discussion in the first quarter, and that's the schedule we're on. So again, Leslie, I recognize that you were patient with us, and now we're having the discussion, so I really appreciate that.
Any additional comments or questions?
I have one.
Go right ahead, Patrick.
Thanks, Tony. So I think we've heard pretty loud and clear on what the preferences are with regard to alternatives. I didn't hear much about our proposal about the term of the policy. We're going to, for lack of a better thing, we'll probably propose that it's coterminous with the guidelines. If anyone feels, I'm getting head nods, good enough, that works.
That's fine with the
So
community.
we'll include that. Thank you, Jason. You weren't the only one that nodded, Jason. I just picked you. So if there's, and I was going to add as well. Am I wrapping up, Tony? Okay, great. So before we leave the comment portion, and this kind of rolls into our next steps on this particular policy development issue. First thing is we've had some good discussion today. We'll take these comments back. Our intent is to report to our board, the February board meeting, on what we've heard today. And then following that, take a draft proposal to our Finance Audit and Power Group in the middle of February. With regard to specific, if there's other comments that you have after you go back to your offices or drive home or whenever inspiration strikes for you, we can give you a week to email or send those to us. Go ahead and send those along to Tony, and we'll take some after the fact considerations if there are any. As I mentioned, just wrapping up, next steps, we'll take this as a draft policy to our Finance Audit and Power Committee in February. Likewise, that'll get translated to the, make sure I get this right. Right. So with the objective that we would take it to our March board meeting for consideration and action. So.
I have a quick question. With regard to the policy, we would like to understand, do you have an idea if the policy is going to apply for 2021 going forward, or are you going to say it applies for this year's water? Because we were in the middle of negotiations and we were under the assumption there wouldn't be that extra OM&R burden because we had just done the previous year where there wasn't that burden. So I mean, for Fort McDowell, we would prefer that if it's something that's going to be applied as a policy, that it be applied as a policy going forward here prospectively rather than retroactively.
Okay, I do believe our intent was to apply it for the 2020 water delivery year. We have delayed this in part so we could go through this process, but we can talk about that some more. Other comments? Other questions about next steps?
If not, then the last agenda item is a call to the audience. We are recording this, so it will be on our website, on our stakeholder page. So if there are any members of the audience that would like to speak, please raise your hand. We do have a handheld microphone that we can get to you, but this would be your opportunity. Anybody from the audience? Not seeing any takers, then I would like to say thank you very much to everybody who has attended, everybody who is sitting around the table, everybody who is in the audience. We definitely appreciate your time and your input in this important matter. Anybody else have anything to say? Great, thank you. For those of you who plan on staying for the second portion of the roundtable on capital charges discussion, we will take about a 15-minute break and then we will reconvene. Thank you.